My name is Nick and I am from the Merri-bek Bicycle User Group, or Merri-bek BUG. Please know that this forum is being recorded and will be made available on YouTube in the next couple of days to rewatch at your leisure. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, on whose lands the district of Pascoe Vale is a part, and on whose lands we walk, ride, drive, and play. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Sovereignty has never been ceded. The Merri-bek Bicycle User Group, or BUG, is a non-profit organisation run by volunteers who love cycling and wish to share the enjoyment. Like myself, the biggest group of Merri-bek BUG members live in this electorate. So you could say this is the cycling heartland of the area. Merri-bek BUG run a regular program of rides and activities across the area, and I encourage everyone in the forum today to get involved, whether a member or not. Tonight's Pascoe Vale Active Transport Forum is a great opportunity to hear from candidates regarding their vision for this electorate. And I'd like to introduce you all to our convener for the forum, Coulston. Take it away, Kulja.
I'll start by unmuting. Hi, everybody. And thanks, Nick. And thanks to the Merri-bek BUG and Walk on Merri-bek and Moreland Community for Action on Transport, known as MCAT, for setting up this Pascoe Vale Active Transport Forum tonight. We're really fortunate to have groups like yours who volunteer their time to bring us together around important issues like this. My name is Coulston. I'm a community broadcaster and resident, and it's a pleasure to be your independent and also a volunteer moderator for the Pascoe Vale Active Transport Forum. And yeah, thanks to the organisers for inviting me. It's a really interesting election for this seat. You might know redistribution since the last election has brought in parts of West Brunswick and Coburg to the Pascoe Vale electorate, and the current member for Pascoe Vale is not recontesting. We will have a new local member in this area, whatever the result in November. It's an electorate too where active transport is an issue for our community. So tonight is about hearing about what candidates running in Pascoe Vale plan to do for walking, riding and public transport in suburbs, including Coburg, Pascoe Vale and West Brunswick, and for the community, for us to ask them questions. And 6 candidates accepted the invitation and are here with us tonight. Thanks to each of you for putting yourself forward to represent our community. It's great to have you here. And it is up to me to give you a quick rundown on how the forum is going to run, so everybody hears across it. We will be keeping to time and finishing at 8:30. I've heard that some forums go beyond, but we are going to end sharp at 8:30. And there's 3 parts. First, we're going to hear from each of the candidates who will speak for 2 minutes each. And then I will ask as many community questions as we can. We got sent dozens ahead of this forum. And in that section, we also hope to open for live questions from those of you here on Zoom. And I'll explain a bit later how we're arranging that and how we'll select your question if you want to ask it tonight. At the end, each candidate will also have another minute to wrap up. Look, a lot of us have had a lot of time in meetings on Zoom in recent years, and let's polish up our Zoom manners for tonight. It's planned to be an informative and hopefully an enjoyable event for everybody. And a couple of house rules so that it runs smoothly. If you want to ask a question, as I said, you might have the chance to do that. Please jot it in the chat at the bottom of the screen and address it to the Merri-bek BUG host. And then they'll alert me to the question and I can invite you to ask it. And you will need to have your full name displayed and your camera on to ask a question. And for the speakers, if you see this clock, and I'll just put it here, that means please complete your thought. It's, when it gets to about 2 minutes, I think that lasts there for about 10 or 15 seconds. Please complete your thought and then we'll move on to the next speaker. Suffice to say, we're not running the election tonight. So if we don't get to your question, remember there are still weeks for you to get in touch with these candidates or others, and to attend other forums and contact their campaigns and all of that sort of thing. But thank you for coming, and great to have so many of you here. And we are inviting all the candidates to set out their priorities for active transport in Pascoe Vale first. And so I'll introduce them in alphabetical order. And Sue Bolton from Socialist Alliance is the first. Thanks, Sue. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. And I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung. I'm also an ex-bus driver and a heavy public transport user, so I'm very keen on this topic. We have a huge number of cars in our cities which do need to be reduced, but you can't reduce car usage in a top-down way or by moralising people. The best way of reducing the number of cars clogging up our cities and roads is by providing realistic alternatives. That means there needs to be a massive injection of money into public transport, not just tinkering around the edges, because there needs to be a really extensive expansion of public transport in a way that we haven't seen since the tram system and the train lines were destroyed in a number of Australian cities in order to force workers to buy cars. Public transport needs to cater to people who live in the outskirts as well as the inner city, and people who are shift workers, including people who do the graveyard shift, as well as everybody else. Public transport also needs to be accessible. Currently, thousands of people with mobility issues are excluded from using public transport unless they live near a train line. There are currently more level crossings being removed than accessible tram stops being installed. Public transport needs to be extensive, convenient, frequent, and operate 24 hours a day and be free or very cheap. Car share also needs to be absorbed into the public transport system, and then the entire public transport system needs to be brought back into public ownership. At the moment, the state government subsidises public transport, but then the companies gouge that transport. I mean, as well as public transport, there also needs to be a big extension of the cycling network, but it also needs to be done carefully, because retrofitting streets can be difficult and raise some practical issues. And I think what we want to do is unite our communities around extending the cycling network so that we don't end up in pointless conflicts between cyclists and car drivers, because often they're actually the same people. Funding is available for a massive expansion of public transport. It's called the North East Link. The North East Link would cost, well, this is before the massive escalation of building costs, cost $16 billion. It's the biggest road project in Victoria's history. We believe that this should be scrapped and the money diverted into funding public transport. Currently, the North East Link will expand the Eastern Freeway from 6 to 10 lanes to 12 to 24 lanes and would wipe out a rail reserve. The traffic in the inner city is often...
Sue, sorry, we've hit the 2 minutes.
Oh, I haven't even got to the Upfield train line. Okay.
Well, we will come back to that. So
that's
thank you very much.
Most important point.
Well, we will come back to that. So we can hear that in a minute. Now over to Anthony Cianflone from the ALP. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you, and I'll do my best to stick to the 2 minutes, but yeah, cut me off as the time comes up. But I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet as well, and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. My name is Anthony Cianflone, and I'm the new Labor candidate for Pascoe Vale, which I'm very humbled to be. I'm a lifelong local. I'm a local parent as well, father of 2 young daughters, and very familiar with our local transport system, both road, train, tram, cycling, walking, and other modes as well. And at the heart of my campaign, it's all about building a better, fairer and more sustainable community. And a key plank for that is, of course, for me, transport, which is something very important to me and obviously all of us in the room here today, because it is transport and fair access, equitable access to good, reliable, frequent public transport and other modes of transport that does keep our economy going. It keeps us in jobs. It gives us the access to health and wellbeing services. and keeps our community connected with friends and family. And that's why, as the Labor candidate, I am very proud of the number of big investments that have been made since 2014, record numbers of investments, in fact, in this community to help improve transport outcomes and transport infrastructure. Starting off, of course, with the Metro Tunnel, which is being built, and that will increase capacity by 71% along the Upfield line and increase patronage by about 45,000 commuters per week along that line on its own. The level crossing projects through Coburg, through Moreland Road, through Reynard Street, Munro Street and Bell Street were delivered as promised, and that unclogged about 50,000 vehicles per day through those 4 intersections, whilst allowing us to run more trains along the Upfield line and better active transport cycling corridor underneath, which now will be extended as part of the commitment to remove a further 8 level crossings along the Brunswick line, which will make the Upfield corridor one of the most important strategic cycling corridors, definitely in the northern region. And with our commitment as well to improve the Upfield corridor from O'Hay Street all the way up to the Ring Road to finish that missing link as well at Bain Street and beyond, Bain Avenue, sorry. We will definitely be putting the Upfield corridor on the map in terms of an active transport corridor for all of us to be proud of and all of us to use as well. It's more than just public transport as well, of course, too. It's about roads and making sure the roads move for all across the sector, freight, and families as well, doing the school drop-offs and the like too. So that's my 2 minutes, I see, and I'm sure we'll get to
it definitely
what to talk about.
I'm a very generous stopwatcher here for everybody, but we are trying to keep to time. Next up, thank you, Anthony. Next up is Margee Glover, representing the Reason Party here.
Hi and welcome. Thanks for everyone turning up. I just want to also acknowledge the land on which we are and pay my respects to elders past and present. I recently heard Wurundjeri elder Professor Di Kerr, Ani Di say, if you look after country, country will look after you. And my thoughts are just with all the flood victims at the moment, both in Melbourne and regional areas. So just a little bit about me. I first moved to Coburg West some 20 odd years ago, mostly because they just built a brand new tollway called CityLink. And I had a fully funded company car and I worked in Port Melbourne. I have to say those first 2 years were absolute bliss. There was less than 20 minutes to work and there was no traffic. Today I still live in the same house and I now work in Parkville and Carlton, and I have commuted by bike for the last 11 years, 9 of which are my red Lettner e-bike. In that time, I've been hit by a car once. I have hit a car once. I've had 5 near misses. I fell off my bike twice and I was rear-ended by another cyclist. I can tell you that all the design faults of the Upfield line. I just possibly can't tell you all the solutions to fix them. I can, however, tell you Reason's policies in this space. We would like to see a fully funded, state-based cycling strategy involving strategic cycling corridors. We want to see safe continuous bike routes separated from other forms of traffic, revitalise and expanded in existing cycle trails. We want to provide bike racks on buses and trams and more welcoming spaces on trains. We want to increase public transport spending. We want to extend tram, cycling and rail options to the north. We would like to see plans for Sydney Road move forward before the start of the SkyRail works in Brunswick. If not, then we want to hear clear plans for where the detours will go. The detour cycling in SkyRail between Coburg and Moreland was pretty unsafe and pretty bad during those works. And I'm not really sure how we're going to have a cycling corridor from 5 years during that build. We'd also like to see more locally, specifically safety around Coburg High, slower speeds on Bell Street, appropriate pedestrian crossing and safer footpaths. We want to see more options too for west-east cycling pathways for the school children to that particular school, and more bus connectivity.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Margee.
I had got to the end. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you so much. And next up, we have Madeleine Ha from the Victorian Socialists. Thanks, Madeleine.
Thanks, Kaya. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong, whose land was stolen and never ceded. I'm a carless PT user, and I've also fallen victim to the chaos of the Upfield train line. So the fight to make that service more frequent is personal and has my full support. The guiding slogan of Victorian Socialist campaign is to put people before profit, and that applies to all our policies, including public transport and on active transport. We think that the privatisation of public transport has been a disaster. It's only made us pay more for a subpar service and made the few profiteers of those services very rich. Public transport should be put back into public hands and should never be for profit. Access to reliable, safe, sustainable and free public transport should be a social right. Without access to public transport, the disadvantages are stark. The vulnerable and poor in our communities become even more limited on whether they can access education, employment, housing options, healthcare options, and so on. Working class people also deserve an active alternative to the misery of driving to work. We deserve as well the well-studied physical and mental health benefits of that. The more cars we get off the road, the better for our climate and for the air quality of our communities. We should all have the opportunity to include a bike ride in our commute. Victorian Socialists support building the missing links in our bicycle network, giving those east and west of the Upfield bike path a chance to bike to work, expanding secure bike parking at public transport hubs such as train stations, busy bus stations and busy tram stations. We would introduce a free bike share scheme. I would also be for a rebate scheme on e-bikes, which I would be the first to sign up for. And I think many others would sign up for as an alternative to driving. Victorian Socialists would invest up to $20 per person per year, or $126 million per year into cycling infrastructure. Walking and cycling should also be safe for everyone.
Thanks, Madeleine. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Leah Horsfall to speak with us. Leah's from the Animal Justice Party, and I think it's important to say you won't see Leah's name on the ballot for the Pascoe Vale electorate. She's actually here on behalf of Elizabeth Adams, who's running from the party here. Leah's running for the Legislative Council, and thank you for stepping in for Elizabeth. Over to you, Leah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Kalia. Yes, I'm running for the Upper House Northern Metropolitan Region, so I will be on a ballot that you see, but not the Lower House ballot. And apologies if you hear some wild children in the background. I hope they keep the volume down. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I live and work on, and particularly thank them for their custodianship of the land, the waterways and the animals of the area. The core values of the Animal Justice Party are kindness, equality, rationality and non-violence, and we apply those values across the board to all policy areas. And if you want to have a look at our land transport policy, that's on our website, and you will see those values coming through in that policy. So if elected, Elizabeth and I would advocate for 20% of Victoria's transport budget to go towards active travel and advocate for increased spending on public transport as well. We would advocate for massively improving the public transport in our region so services are frequent, reliable, affordable and accessible to all, including service animals and companion animals. Key local priorities include duplicating the end of the Upfield line as soon as possible, preferably 15 years ago, but I'll take as soon as possible, making tram stops accessible along Sydney Road and other main arteries, and reducing the cost of public transport, including reviewing the zone system, where the further people are away from the city, the more they pay to travel into the city, which makes sense on one hand, but is not fair on the other hand. Advocate for improved walking and cycling infrastructure with key local priorities, including separated bike lanes, not just paint, actual separated bike lanes, safer accessible footpaths and safe active transport routes around schools. So one example being the proposed crossing lights on Elizabeth Street near Coburg High School. Better parking for bikes in schools, which is something I've worked on at my children's school in Moreland, and incentives for purchasing bikes, including electric bikes. When it comes to roads, we would advocate for lower speed limits, Animal crossing infrastructure. So in an urban area like ours, that's one example of that is rope bridges across roads for possums. So they're not getting hit on the roads as much, which is dangerous for people as well as the animals. And incentives for people to transition to electric cars and car sharing services, while noting that this is not, a high priority. The transition away from cars is our main focus, but we recognise the need for people who do need cars to have ones that are less damaging to the environment. Thank you, Kalia.
Thank you, Leah. And next up, Angelica Panopoulos from the Australian Greens. Thanks, Angelica.
Thank you. And so good evening, everyone. And thank you to the BUG and to Kalia for putting on this forum tonight, and to everyone who's here in this virtual room. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that we're having this virtual meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and just pay my respects to all elders, past, present, and emerging. So as has been said, my name is Angelica, and I'm your Greens candidate for Pascoe Vale. I'm a Merri-bek councillor, and I am really quite proud of all the work that I've done on council, working with the other councillors, including Sue here, and the broader community. I'm proud to have gotten pedestrian safety upgrades in Brunswick West into our budget, advocated for signalised pedestrian crossings on Boundary Road and Moreland Road, advocated for reduced speed limits along the Nicholson Street Bend, and fought really hard with a good team of councillors to keep and expand separated bike lanes across the municipality. We've done a lot, and that is true. But at the same time, I'm also getting quite frustrated. And I'm getting frustrated because at council, we're 1 out of 79. And the big issues, and there's so many of them, but one huge one is this: it's active transport. It needs systemic state level reform and investment. Transport accounts for about 40% of the emissions in this municipality. It's our fastest growing source of emissions. We need to make it cheaper, easier, and safer for people to switch to walking, cycling, using public transport, and driving electric cars in order to tackle the climate crisis. I believe that the Greens are the only ones with a systemic plan to push the next government to cut those transport emissions by massively boosting public transport services, building more separated bike lanes, safer footpaths and pedestrian crossings, and making electric vehicles far more affordable, because they will be part of the mix. So I guess I come to you as a candidate with the commitment to fight both inside and outside of the Parliament for the investment that we know we need here in Pascoe Vale. I believe that we have to make this seat marginal, because as we've seen with the very need for this forum, nothing changes if nothing changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody for making those opening remarks. And quite a few people joined us as you were each speaking. And people know where they've come. You've clicked the Zoom link, and here we are. My name is Coulston, moderator for this Pascoe Vale Active Transport Forum, coming to you from Wurundjeri country tonight. And a couple of recaps, I guess. You are welcome to put questions in the chat. They will go to the Merri-bek BUG moderator, and who will bring them to my attention, and will ask people to put their cameras on and put their name on their display and ask questions a bit later. Ahead of the forum, though, the organisers invited members of the community to submit questions, and we've received dozens of questions for the candidates, and they've been prioritised by issues that came up multiple times from different questioners, and they've also been selected to try and cover a breadth of issues from across the electorate. And I have to say the questions sent in were on point and excellent, so thank you to everybody who took such care in writing them and submitting them. And it's impractical for every candidate to answer every question for us to then be able to finish at 8:30. So I will put the questions, relay them, and put them to a couple of candidates at a time, and try and keep an eye on the clock so that people don't go on and on. But it's been a really respectful room so far, so thank you so much for that. And we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can. And yeah, welcome everyone. It's great to have so many people here. There's heaps of people here. That's great. So the first question, and this one is, I'll direct it to Sue Bolton and Madeleine Ha, and it's on public transport and the 58 tram. And we'll start with Sue. Will you support the extension of the 58 tram route on Melville Road to proceed through Pascoe Vale to Boundary Road, Hadfield? Over to you, Sue.
Yes, I do. In fact, I moved the motion on council and won the motion for the council to advocate for the 58 tram to be extended to Hadfield, because especially people who live in between the two train lines, it gives another opportunity for a public transport route into the city from Hadfield. And I also support the expansion of the number 19 tram to Campbellfield as well. So both of those are important to provide more options for people.
And Madeleine?
Yeah, I would absolutely support that as well. In doing my little bit of research for this forum, it's been a great opportunity to learn a lot about things like that, because yeah, apparently the 58 tram, like leading up to Hadfield, it was widened with the intention of building a tram line in the future, and I just think it's yeah, pretty ridiculous that it hasn't been extended, and yeah, it just yeah, reduces opportunities for more people. Yeah.
And there will be time at the end for candidates to come back to issues, so if there's others that want to make a comment on that, please make a note and you can come back to it later. Moving to the next question. This one's on public transport too, but rail, and I'll put it first to Angelica and then Leah. And I think if we've got a chance, we're running pretty good on time, also to Sue, because you flagged that you wanted to speak to this. Can candidates please tell us about their position on and level of commitment to the need for track duplication from Gowrie to Upfield stations to increase service and frequency on the Upfield line? We'll start with Angelica, please.
Awesome, great question. And I think one that comes up every single election time, and it has for a very, very long time. So the short part of it is that the Greens have long supported the campaign to duplicate the Upfield line so that we can then increase the services across the entirety of that line, so, you know, beyond Gowrie. So that's the short answer of it. But just to go into a little bit more detail very quickly, if we are able then to increase the services at that end of the line, you know, we can free up the congestion that happens further down, because it means that people don't have to drive further into the suburbs, into the inner suburbs, to be able to get onto a train. And I just think, quite frankly, that, you know, the fact that it comes once every 20 minutes is just not quite good enough. So yeah, we've been supportive of the campaign in the past. We'll continue to be supportive of it. Yeah.
And Leah.
Thanks, Kalia. Yes, as I said in my opening statement, I'm completely committed to supporting the duplication of the end of the track. I'd also like to see it extended beyond Upfield. I think that the lack of public transport in the outer north of Melbourne is a massive equity issue. People can't afford the houses closer to the city, and then they're forced into owning often multiple cars just to get to their jobs and so on. And as Angelica said, that contributes to congestion around our area as well as further out and further towards the city. And yes, I think it's worth also noting that that duplication should really happen very quickly, preferably by the time the Metro Tunnel opens in 2025, because then we can really take advantage of that increased capacity, and have trains every 10 minutes or even more frequently would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And quickly, Sue, I know that you wanted to come to that at the beginning, if you want to address it now.
Yes, there's this is a critical issue. A massive number of trains get cancelled, and it's massive discrimination against people in the north. As soon as the train's 6 minutes late, it terminates at Coburg, which means that anyone who lives north of the tram line has zero way of getting to the city by public transport. And so it's absolute necessity to urgently duplicate the end of the Upfield line. The Metro Tunnel conclusion will not result in more trains on this line, because trains can't leap over each other on the single track at the end of the line. And you can't look at have a solution just for people in the more affluent south of the line. You need a solution for everyone on the line, as well as an extension. People have lost jobs, missed medical appointments, missed exams, missed job interviews, etc., because of train cancellations on this line. So this is not an inconvenience, it's urgent. Not a single major party has a definite plan for duplicating the line. And so we actually need to fight for it and make a big noise. And that's why I initiated the Upfield Transport Alliance to unite the communities up and down the line in 2017.
Thanks, Sue. And it sounds like it's something that we can come back to if we have time to pick up on anything there. But there are lots of questions and that are critical as well that we had sent through. And one is, well, we actually got quite a few on accessible tram stop, protected bike lanes, improved pedestrian and amenity for Sydney Road. So I'll put this one to Anthony and also to Margee. Here's the question, but like I said, it was representative of quite a few questions. It's a little bit long actually, but Sydney Road does not have accessible tram stops. It's also difficult for pedestrians and people on bikes to safely navigate. Reimagining Sydney Road to include accessible tram stop, protected bike lanes and wider footpaths with more trees will address the disadvantage faced by those suffering from inequitable transport accessibility, including women, the elderly and the disabled, and bring more local residents to Sydney Road. And the question, where do you stand on the future of Sydney Road? And we'll start with you, please, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the things I didn't get to in my intro basically was that my number one, or one of my lead priorities as the candidate, and hopefully if elected as the member, is to help kickstart the revitalisation of Sydney Road in central Coburg. I believe that with the huge investment the state government's made into the level crossing project, into delivering 2 world-class stations at Moreland and at Coburg, that really is the catalyst to kickstart broader rejuvenation across the precinct. And in my mind, I genuinely believe Coburg can become a jobs hub for the whole northern region, not just Merri-bek, the entire northern region. And in that regard, we have so much opportunity, so many projects that we can leverage and coordinate at a federal, state and local and non-government level as well, that I believe can genuinely help in that regard, whether it's the Pentridge Entertainment Precinct that's coming online, whether it's the new Coburg Health Hub, which to Council's credit has been progressing, whether it's the investment into Coburg City Oval to get that going, to attract more events and more diverse type of events, whether it's the Arts Hub next to Coburg Station. I think there's so many opportunity and ingredients there. I'm really excited to hopefully lead the charge on in good faith and get Sydney Road revitalised as part of that. And of course, as part of that, we've got to look at, of course, all the basic ambience and amenity along the strip. And that includes, of course, accessible tram stops, which is a big issue. I acknowledge that. And that is definitely something that if I'm elected, I'll be working on in good faith to help advance. I have raised this issue already with the Minister, and in that regard, I do also note and acknowledge there is currently an accessible transport strategy being developed by the state government, which is on track to be completed by the end of this year. So through that process, I hope to then engage in the context of Sydney Road to look at opportunities there. I should also note as well, the new level crossing projects, they are all being built to fully accessible standards along the Upfield line and all the other lines. It is easier to do that, of course, as part of new infrastructure being built and introduced into communities. And obviously it's a bit more challenging, as Sue sort of pointed out as well, in terms of retrofitting older infrastructure, which nonetheless is still important and we need to do. And I'll be committed to helping to advance that as well. In good faith as part of the broader revitalisation of Coburg.
Thanks, Anthony, for that. And Margee. And if it was a long question, but it was really about where do you stand on the future of Sydney Road?
It was interesting to hear Anthony's response, but I feel there was a bit of lack of detail in some of it. I would like to make a stronger statement that I don't think we can revitalise Sydney Road when we're still treating it as a car park. Sydney Road's the longest high street in the Southern Hemisphere. We should be proud of that. But at the moment, I feel like it's the longest lineal car park in the Southern Hemisphere. And I think till we start resolving those issues and putting in protected bike lanes and, of course, the accessible tram stops, which I think we had this discussion 4 years ago. I remember going to a retail Moreland presented at, now Merri-bek presented at the retailers, and I thought we were all geared up to do it, and it seems to have gone nowhere. So I certainly hope, Anthony, if your party gets in there, committed to moving on it in the next 4 years.
Thanks, Margee. And I think I'm just going to think this for every issue. There's just so many things to dig into, but let's trust that we will get questions in the chat and live questions from the audience too. So please be putting those through, and we can come back to some of these issues as well. One topic that came through that it seemed really quite topical and a result of police activity in the area targeting e-scooters. And so I'll ask this one, we'll stay with you for a sec, Margee, but then also go to Angelica and Leah. This is from a resident who lives and works in Coburg. I'm riding what is currently an illegal scooter whilst wearing a helmet, travelling under 25k per hour, exclusively on bike paths. I can travel from home to work faster than by car or public transport. This is safe, convenient, environmentally friendly. Where do you stand on the use of privately owned scooters? And we'll just stick with you for a sec there, Margee.
Yeah, I think we're trialling the e-scooters for private system at the moment, and we're waiting for the results of that. But I would certainly can't see the difference between me riding my electric bike at 25k an hour, sometimes even more, and e-scooters. It's about the people using them being safe, that they're set on separated paths from pedestrians. But yeah, I think it's new technology that we need to start legalising. We need to start dealing with in legislation.
And Angelica, a view from you, please.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of different points to this. The first is that we have to acknowledge the reality, as was put in the question, that they're being used now, and we need to find an appropriate way to make sure that people are safe when they use e-scooters and that they can be regulated, so that we can ensure personal safety. We saw, I think it was about a month ago now, a resident of Pascoe Vale passed away after his e-scooter clipped on a speed hump. And, that's absolutely just horrific and awful. And so, we need to have a plan as to how we're going to regulate these mobility devices, these e-scooters, to make sure that people are safe. So we've got the trial happening at the moment in a couple of local government areas, and I'll be keen to see the report and to see exactly what's outlined and what's recommended within that. And I think the third point is that it's become very clear that e-scooters pose a unique challenge because they're not suitable to be with cars on the road, and they can't be used on the footpath with regular pedestrians. So it kind of seems like to me that if we want to make sure that we've got safe use of e-scooters, we should just kind of make some separated e-scooter lanes, which, I don't know, sounds a whole lot like a whole lot of separated bike lanes to me. So,
and I should say that there was some really great ideas that came through in the questions about equating them with mobility aids available under the NDIS as well. So seeing the link there. And I said I would also come to Leah. Yeah, if we can.
Yeah, thank you, Kalia. I'll just be quick. Yeah, I think similar to Angelica and Margee. Am I saying your name right? Sorry, Margee, if I'm not. Yeah, I think that they're part of the mix. People are using them. They're more environmentally friendly than cars. I think we just have to accept that they're probably here to stay and look at the best way to manage them on the roads, which I agree, I think is through separated lanes, which can be used for bikes and e-scooters. I think makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks for being so clear, all of you. A question came through from Walk on Merri-bek, and I'll start with Madeleine Ha on this one, and go to Sue Bolton. The question is, the Pascoe Vale district has many busy arterial roads. Residents want safe ways to cross, but there are many long stretches without pedestrian crossings. Tim Reed has secured new pedestrian lights on Moreland Road near Brunswick Northwest Primary School, and Lizzie Blanthorne has secured pedestrian lights on Gaffney Street near Pascoe Vale Station. If elected, which sites will you be focusing on for new safe pedestrian infrastructure? And yeah, starting with you, Madeleine.
Yeah, I would definitely support more crossings around those arterial roads, specifically like those proposals around Gaffney Street, even like around Pascoe Vale Road, it's just like long stretches around schools, and you know, like I've experienced it myself, just being tempted to like cross without a proper walk, without a proper crossing, and yeah, you can see how that just massively elevates the risk of an accident. So yeah, I think that's definitely should be a priority.
Thanks, Madeleine. And Sue.
Hi, I've been involved in a few campaigns. Some of them have had to be fought hard to win pedestrian crossings on Newlands Road and O'Hay Street and a couple of other places. I think we especially need safe routes, both pedestrian and cycling, for students and around schools, high schools, primary schools, etc. I'm especially aware of the issues around Coburg High School, but it isn't just Coburg High School, there are other schools as well. So some areas that I've particularly been involved with is the Bell Street Bridge, well, actually a safer pedestrian environment on Murray Road, Elizabeth Street, but also outside areas which attract people to jaywalk, which resulted in someone being killed on Nicholson Street outside the IGA, and we won after a big fight that pedestrian crossing. And so one area where we absolutely need a pedestrian crossing is outside the IGA on Moreland Road, but there are also other spots as well. The Boundary Road becoming extra busy, Coonan's Road. There are other areas as well, but I think especially where there are new developments, where there's a business that's set up, such as a supermarket that attracts a lot of people to want to cross a very busy road and, you know, duck across for the bottle of milk they forgot to get on the way home.
And some of those intersections that we just heard about there are raised in questions later as well. So we'll come to those with some of the other candidates. They seem really important to the people here tonight. Now go to something that feels very much like an interview question, I have to say, but we are kind of interviewing tonight, aren't we? Particularly on this issue. We've got 6 candidates with us, and thank you. So the question is, and I'll say, I'll go to Anthony and also Angelica to answer this, please. The United Nations recommends that 20% of a government's transport budget be spent on enabling active transport, that's including walking and cycling. But the Climate Council and others have calculated the Victorian government's spend at about 2%. It is notable that New South Wales' active travel budget for Greater Sydney is almost 20 times that of the Victorian government's for Greater Melbourne. If we were to multiply by 10 the funds available for active transport from the next Victorian government, how would your party spend this cash to support more people to walk to destinations such as schools, shops, trains, and do that safely in the seat of Pascoe Vale? And I'll go to you two first, please, Anthony.
Thank you for the question.
They're amazing questions tonight, so I just have to say
they're questions. I'll do my best to do them justice. But the first thing I'd say is, look, I always find it interesting when we get compared to New South Wales and Sydney when it comes to transport budget and active transport budget. I mean, we've got to remember that Sydney has a lot of catching up to do as well. They made the decision back in the 50s and the 60s to tear up their tram network, which at the time was actually one of the biggest in the world alongside Melbourne's. And now they're spending billions to try and replace small portions of them and retrofit that back into the grid. So I think it's important, just in terms of context, we have the world's largest tram network. That is a whole nother option and realm of transport that locals across Melbourne and Victoria are able to access, and that alleviates pressure on trams and other modes as well. In terms of what I do with a bigger budget, in terms of transport options across Pascoe Vale, well, a couple of the things include some of those big build projects that we're already committed to as a state Labor government, delivering the upgrades, along the metro line, along the Brunswick corridor as well, those 8 crossings along Brunswick, and further improvements along the rest of the Upfield line, the active transport corridor all the way through to the Ring Road. The bus network as well, east-west. We currently have the bus review taking place at the moment, which is very timely. And I think that's a great opportunity, especially as the Upfield line gets upgraded and capacity increases as well on Craigieburn because of the Metro Tunnel, up to 27% more capacity on Craigieburn. It's a great strategic time to review the east-west connections of buses as well. I think active transport wide as well, there's a big opportunity there too. Of course, we've invested and we're delivering that $4 million north-south project connecting Glenroy to O'Hay Street at the moment through Derby Street. And there's other opportunities as well, I think, that we can explore and we can pursue, definitely. And the big one for me as well, again, it comes back to central Coburg and really solidifying Coburg as a central jobs hub. One of the important things to mention in that regard is the fact that we have one of the lowest employment self-sufficiency rates in Australia as a municipality. Actually, it's about 70 to 80% of residents have to commute out of this municipality to work, and that's according to various stats, including state government and councils. And that does, when we talk about congestion, when we talk about roads and rail and pressure on our infrastructure for transport, that is a big part of it because it is commuting to work, particularly for those working in the city and the outer suburbs further out. That creates that pressure, compounds carbon emission and climate change issues as well. But if we can solidify and create more jobs in Coburg that match the local job skill set of local workers, I think we'll go a fair way there to reducing carbon emissions, taking the pressure off transport and congestion. And that's really my long-term vision, hopefully as if I'm elected as a member for Pascoe Vale, in terms of infrastructure, active transport, and also local community sustainability by solidifying Coburg as a jobs hub.
Thanks, Anthony. And Angelica, I won't read the whole question again, but if you had 10 times the funds that those organisations have currently calculated that Victoria spends, what would you do with it?
Great. So firstly, I think Anthony raised a fair couple of points about, jobs within the central Coburg precinct and about our expansive tram network, although frequency and accessibility are slightly different issues there. But I think the question was specifically about supporting people to walk to schools, shops and train stations in Pascoe Vale. So regarding that stat that our state government's spend is at 2% of the transport budget, I actually read online that it was at 1%. So no matter which way, if it's 2 or 1, it's pretty woefully inadequate when you compare it to what the UN recommends for us. The Greens have pledged $2.5 billion over the next 4 years to implement a big bike build, which would get us closer to reaching that recommended 20%. And this is costed through the Parliamentary Budget Office, and it gets published on the website as well, where everyone's election commitments go up to hold all of the parties to account. So regarding specifically how that cash could be spent, well, the beautiful thing that I've learned in my time as a councillor and through working with the community is that we've got community members, community groups, and the local council that have got so many lists of pedestrian infrastructure upgrades that are needed. So I think one super important step would be for the state government as a local member to say to the council, to say to the people on the ground, hearing about, hey, I had a near miss here. Hey, it would be really handy if I had a pedestrian crossing here. It would be to give them some grants and to give them some money to deliver the projects that have been there waiting on that 10-year cycle. So that can be something as simple as putting in wombat crossings, which are the raised pedestrian crossings, going to the bigger projects like the signalised pedestrian crossings. There's the public realm upgrades to make you want to walk to and stay in your local shopping area. We can fix up the accessibility and the walkability around our train stations. There's just so much that we can do. Yep.
Thanks, Angelica. And thank you, everybody, for seeing the clock when it goes up. Really appreciate it. There's so many great questions coming through, and we've still got a lot that were pre-submitted. So it's great to get through so many, actually. There's been a lot of interest in the Upfield shared path. And I'll ask this one again, Anthony, and then go to Margee. Here's the question. Sections of the Upfield share path are being progressively upgraded to better quality and separate pedestrian and cycling spaces. And we've definitely got that here in Coburg. However, most people living in the Pascoe Vale district, and particularly those in Brunswick West or Pascoe Vale, still don't have a safe riding route with the same degree of separation from traffic to get then to the upfield. What will candidates do to ensure that the network of protected bike lanes is built, especially east-west routes? And we'll start again there with Anthony, please.
Yeah, thank you. Look, the first thing I'd say is I think we need to, I guess if I was elected as a local member, I think prioritising how we can work across all levels of government and with the community to elevate the role of our recognised strategic cycling corridors. And across the Pascoe Vale electorate, I mean, we've got Boundary Road, we've got Gaffney Street, we've got O'Hay Street, we've got Munro Street, and also Moreland Road further to the south. So integrating each of those 4 or 5 strategic corridors, east and west, in a really efficient and effective way, I think will really encourage residents from both the Brunswick West side and also the Coburg East Newlands sort of corridor as well, and central part of the electorate, to really take advantage of better connecting with the Upfield line, which is set to become arguably the most strategically significant cycling corridor in the northern region. And I really think it needs to be done in a way, though, that brings the community along. I really think that, to be frank, I think the approach that was taken around Kent Road, has raised a lot of concerns and a lot of questions from a lot of local residents. I have spoken to pretty much quite a lot of those residents, still not them personally. I know there's been a signature petition of about 2,000 people raising concern opposed to the way those bike lanes were installed. And that's concerning because we want to be delivering these projects in a way that, in my view, ensures that traffic keeps flowing and vehicles keep flowing in either direction for both, private vehicles, freight vehicles, but also for cyclists too. And also for basic utility vehicles to access too, whether it's street sweepers and the like too. So I think if we're going to be upgrading the strategic cycling corridors, east and west, which I'm very keen to work on and partner on, it needs to be done in a partnership approach, and that means bringing the community along.
Can I just ask, and I'm sort of breaking the approach that I started with here, but just to jump to the next question, then I'll come back to Margee for the one on the Upfield, Margee. But I've got a question here, Anthony, saying that Labor promised protected bike lanes on Cumberland Road in 2019 and is currently delivering painted bike lanes on Derby Street instead. Do you think this is appropriate? And can you explain why that's happened?
Yeah, I've met with people from the bicycle user group. I've met with local community as well, and I've had relevant briefing material as well provided to me in relation to that announcement and subsequent announcement too. And I guess what I can say is, following the subsequent announcement and following further detailed analysis by the Department of Transport, it was recommended to state government that the Cumberland Road option not be pursued as the preferred option because of issues associated with Cumberland Road being a major arterial road, coming off Bell Street as a major arterial off the Tullamarine Freeway as well. It's utilised by over 1,000 heavy double B freight trucks, vehicles per day. It experiences in excess of around, I believe it was 20,000 vehicles movements per day. And in terms of safety, in terms of impact on existing buses that utilise the corridor as well, in terms of vehicles being able to overtake turning vehicles who may be turning left or right, it was assessed, in my understanding, to have a significant impact if up to 140 odd car spots would be to be removed and road passageway were to be reduced. So the Department of Transport recommended an alternative option, the Derby Street option, which is a lot safer. It's used a lot less by freight vehicles, and it does serve a different strategic function than Cumberland Road and was deemed more appropriate than Cumberland Road for the north-south bike corridor.
Okay, well, yeah, hopefully that answers the question that came through. So thank you for that. And Margee, we'll go back to the previous question on the Upfield, because there's been just so many questions about that has come through.
Yeah,
so
look, I think it's a really, really important. I don't even necessarily think it's about major roads, less. I think it needs more, because at the moment, Sydney Road is so unsafe to actually kind of cycle along at certain times of the day that people like me use the Upfield to get to a certain point and then cross back into Sydney Road to be able to utilise where we want to go. If I want to go to my doctor's, I go down the Upfield line and then I pick the road that gets me to Sydney Road to the doctor's. And sometimes that route isn't very safe. And I think we need to consider the routes that come off Upfield to connect us to Sydney Road, if we're not going to develop Sydney Road with separated bike paths, needs to be better. And I think also things like Victoria Street, which runs parallel to Bell Street, I go down there every day and I have no idea why that has not been developed into something, whether it's a council or a state. It's the widest road that we've got in the area, and it has roads crossing it, and it's the only bike path I can think for my child to come from the out of west side of Coburg zone down into the main shopping centre and through to Coburg High School. So there's no, Moreland Road is really dangerous. I've actually had to take it this week because I've had blockages in laneways and there's been roadworks. And I would like to see separated bike lanes and car parking there, because the high risk of getting doored there is enormous. And that's one of the areas Anthony mentioned. I think it's a really good road to develop, Moreland Road, but it needs development because the bicycle path actually disappears where there's a light crossing there at the bottom of the hill. And I'm not sure how we solve the problem for West Brunswick, because there seems to be very little cross from West Brunswick over to the Upfield bike path at the moment.
Thanks, Margee. And yeah, before we move to the next question, there's a lot, as I said, there's been a few people prompting that at this point, they would like me to put the question about the duplication of the Upfield line to Anthony. Anthony, makes sense, I guess. You're representing the party that's in government at the moment. And so, yeah, could you share your view on duplication of the Upfield line, please?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very familiar with that proposal. It's going back many years. As a local person who's used the Upfield line myself as well, I'm very familiar and have experienced personally the challenges and the issues that Sue touched on earlier as well. From a state government point of view, I mean, the state has decided to do things strategically in terms of, you know, if you were to duplicate the Upfield line first without the metro tunnel, it would lead to a bottleneck, because the city loop has been at capacity for a long time, and that has been the biggest issue in relation to unlocking the capacity for the Upfield corridor. So the metro tunnel, what it does as the first stage priority from a state government point of view, is take the Upfield line out of that city loop and actually designate it almost through an entirely new tunnel that will take Upfield now through the new Arden precinct, which will be also home to the new Australia's biggest health project and health precinct, a new Royal Melbourne Hospital and Royal Women's Hospital, through to the Parkville precinct as well, to Melbourne University, through to the Town Hall station, through the Federation Square station, all the way to Anzac Station and beyond to the southeast. So the Upfield line basically will be unlocked in terms of potential capacity, service frequency and patronage. I mean, 71% extra services during peak hours at least will be provided through that project. And that'll benefit people up the top between Gowrie and Upfield as well, through increased trains going right through the line. That allows for an extra 40,000 passengers per week as well to be made for capacity to be provided for, on top of the existing 14,000 residents who utilise that line. And so I do understand and acknowledge the need to duplicate. I'm very familiar with it. I previously, in a previous role, wrote Council's advocacy strategy on that issue too, which I'm very proud of too. But as the local member, if elected, I definitely will continue to be a strong advocate for the Upfield line. It would be great to have that all done, you know, but as I said, it's about priorities, and the priority for the state government was to build the metro tunnel first. The level crossing projects are the next phase as part of that plan.
Okay, and I guess going by the amount of interest that we've had in that question and asking about duplication, it sounds like there's a bit of work there to bring the community along with agreeing that that's the way to do it. So Anthony, really thanks so much for that, and we'll move to the next questions. Hopefully that answers what people are wanting to hear tonight and hearing from the candidates. So we've got a little bit more time for some of the pre-asked questions, and then we'll go to some live questions. And I understand we've got a few ramping, so I'll ask another question here on speed limit. So I'll start with Madeleine on this one. If elected, what will you do to push for reform of speed limits on local streets to include 30 km an hour in the Department of Transport's speed zoning policy and deliver renewed credibility to the state government's claim that they are a leader in road safety? So this one's about advocacy, but particularly on the 30 km an hour. To you, Madeleine, and then I'll go to Leah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I believe very much in bottom-up advocacy. I think the more democratic the processes of advocating for things like reducing speeds in local zones is like the best approach. So yeah, grassroots activism, community activism, and yeah, if I was elected, I would use that platform to the best of my ability to speak out for it, for community safety. Yeah.
Thank you. And Leah.
Thanks, Kalia. Yeah, I'm very supportive of moves to reduce speed limits. And I think that part of this goes, in terms of making it happen, making it acceptable to people, is hand in hand with efforts to make public transport and active transport the more available, appropriate, attractive option for people, because people like those other modes of transport. We just have such a car-centric sort of obsession in Victoria and across Australia, I would say, that they're not always the easiest options. The easiest option is often the car because that's catered for. So as those other options become more appealing, which is where my party wants to focus on, that appeal of the car will, decrease. And therefore, I think people would be more accepting of lowered speed limits. I think a big challenge at the moment is that if people are depending on cars, if that's their best option, then they don't want to be slowed down. They want to get to where they want to go. So I think lowering the speed limits on its own will be met with resistance. Not that I necessarily agree with that resistance, but I think it would come. And therefore, it needs to go hand in hand with giving people real alternatives to driving their car. Thanks.
Thank you. And look, I'll ask one last of the pre-submitted questions, and then we'll go to live questions. And I'll ask this one to Sue and also to Angelica, please. This one's about Murray Road, and we have had a few comments on this road already tonight, but not quite answering this, I don't think. So Murray Road between Elizabeth Street and Sydney Road was increased to 2 lanes each way some years ago, and it says here with no consultation. This has squashed the fast 60 km/h traffic right up against the extremely narrow share path, which is heavily used by people riding, walking and pushing prams. There are also many near misses at the crossing by the pool there. After a recent site visit where the Vic Roads rep said she felt unsafe, Vic Roads have undertaken to work with Merri-bek Council to look at this stretch of road, including to consider lane reduction. So a question, we'll start with you, Sue. Do you support lane and speed reduction on Murray Road on this stretch? And I hope I described it well so that you know where we're talking about. And will you advocate for this to Vic Roads?
I think I would support lane reduction. In fact, it used to have less lanes, and then it was extended, as the question mentioned. I mean, there also need to be pedestrian crossings, like especially at Outlook Drive, and there also needs to be protections as where Newlands Road comes into Murray Road, and protection for people who are walking along the footpath between Coburg Lakes Reserve and Newlands Road. And I think at the moment there's not really any safe place to cycle, and also walking is hazardous in this particular stretch. So I think it is really appropriate that the lanes be reduced or separated bike lanes or something like that. So I'm sort of very supportive of the efforts of the local community, especially people around from Coburg High, but it's not just Coburg High. Other people in this area can't cross Murray Road in order to catch the bus. The rare buses, there aren't many buses that go there, doesn't even run on Sundays, but yeah, there's a number of things that need to happen on Murray Road, in addition to maybe the reduction, highly likely the reduction of lanes. I think that I do support that because of the perilous nature of Murray Road.
And Angelica, your view, please.
Yep. So I think my view is quite similar to Sue's in that, I do think that really anything that we can do to reduce traffic, reduce congestion and reduce speed is incredibly important. As was said in the question, there's been so many near misses, and you just don't feel safe when you're walking along that strip of Murray Road. When you're in that little precinct, you don't feel safe at all. And it's been made clear to me through lived experience. It's been made clear to me through members of the community that things need to change there. Speed limit reductions and supporting like the lane reduction as well. That's only one piece of the puzzle, as Sue mentioned. We need to have that signalized pedestrian crossing and that more strategic, holistic view in terms of the high school and where that strip of Murray Road actually links up to and who is going to be benefiting and who is going to be using it. So I know that was much of a very similar position as to what Sue had, but yeah, I do support that and really whatever it will take in consultation with the community and the experts to make that area safer. It's what we need.
Thanks, both of you, and thanks, everybody. And we will move to some live questions now. So I've got some names here, and please, as I mentioned at the beginning and also in the middle, if you have submitted a question, please make sure your name is displayed and that you put your camera on. And what I'll do is I'll call your name and hopefully get it correct, but feel free to introduce yourself as well and come quickly to your question. It would be really handy too if you have someone in mind, or pick a couple of candidates you want to direct your question to, please, or else we'll have 6 answers and we'll only get through a couple, so that would be handy too. So the first question is Jose Villadangos. If you could put your camera on, and the team behind the scenes is going to spotlight you so that you can join us here, and please ask your question. Jose.
Thank you. I hope that you can hear me properly.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the forum. I asked this question on behalf of the community group SABE, which seeks to improve the safety of the Bell Street Bridge risk zone mentioned by Sue Bolton. Working with the Derwin and Merri-bek councils and Coburg High School, we have prepared an information document that can be accessed with a link that will be shared by the moderators to the attendees of the forum. The conclusion of this document is that we urgently need $250,000 in funding for a research and redesign plan to eliminate the safety issues of the Bell Street risk zone, which puts at risk the students of Coburg High School. This should be followed by allocation of funds to implement the plan's recommendations as a matter of urgency. What is the position of Anthony, Sue, Angelica, and if possible, if there is time, other candidates on this $250,000 commitment? Do you support it? And what would be your actions to obtain this funding if elected? Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. And I must say at this point that I'm a very proud member of the Coburg High School Council, elected by the community. So because this is around Coburg High, not my question, but I just wanted to say that. If we can start with you, please, Anthony. And thank you, Jose, for directing it to 3 of the candidates. You first.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Jose. And it was lovely to meet you and some other residents a few months ago now, I think, at Kat Theophanas's office. To talk about the issue and for you to brief us on the issue as well, which I really appreciated. I personally am very familiar with the issue as well, being a local resident, commuting through there quite frequently, but also having been a previous advocacy officer at Darebin City Council, where I was involved in advocacy on this issue from a council perspective too. So I sort of wear a few hats on this front, and Coburg High as well, of course. I think there's Kate Hall, the president here today too, who's briefed me on this issue as well. Yes, this is an issue that is very important. A lot of students from Coburg High, as you know, and many of us know, cross over that bridge on a daily basis to access the school. We know there's been other near misses in the past as well. And so I'm very familiar with the various issues associated with the bridge as well. I know as a first step, there has been some improvements made, whether it's the shark teeth, whether it's the increased signage, whether it's other measures and treatments that have been placed in that intersection to try and reduce and raise awareness about road safety there, which is important. But of course, there is more to do. I have, and my colleagues, the Labor candidate for Preston, the Labor member for Northcote, Kate Theophanis, all very aware of it. And if re-elected, we'll continue to be strong advocates on this issue as part of a re-elected government to keep advancing, attention around and investment around this initiative, alongside all the other initiatives that are required too in the context of Coburg High School students, whether it's Elizabeth Street, Murray Road, Newlands Road, Bell Street as well. Strategically, I feel like there is a few issues at play with Coburg High that we need to pay urgent attention to, immediate attention to improve safety for all commuters, not just the students, but all commuters. So I'll definitely be a strong supporter in that regard. And
we'll go to Sue next, then Angelica, please.
I've walked around this area with Jose and other members of the community group. I think the community group has taken the first step by really raising this issue. I know that a student was hit while waiting to cross the road on the corner of Elizabeth Street and Bell Street at the Bell Street, near the Bell Street Bridge. I definitely support this money being allocated to working up what sort of design things will make things better, and their range of things that the community group's already identified, including the type of curbing, but also the fact that the footpath is too narrow. In fact, one part of the footpath, you can't even fit a twin pram along, let alone holding a toddler's hand while pushing a stroller. But the corner of Elizabeth Street and Bell Street seems particularly dangerous. A lot of cars are running into that corner. So I think this is a really critical safety issue. And I think, like a lot of these issues, you actually have to highlight through community campaigns to politicians and bureaucrats the human impact of these disaster zones, so that they don't get seen as just like a list of crossings that the department may or may not get to. So I think we need to keep highlighting the issues to make sure that this gets fixed. And ideally, there was meant to be a separate pedestrian bridge in addition to the car bridge across the Merri Creek there, but the pedestrian bridge was never built. And in fact, that would be the ideal thing, which would be for bikes and pedestrians.
Thanks, Sue. And Angelica, please.
Sure. So I've firstly, thank you for the question. And I guess, I've been on top of this issue for a little while now. I've met with representatives from Coburg High and the Safe Access Across Bell Street Bridge group. And I'm entirely supportive of this campaign and the $250,000 that's needed to investigate and design solutions. Now, to perhaps others in the Zoom room, this may sound like a whole lot of money for investigation and design, but the point is that this is to properly look at the problem and to see how we can actually fix the issue, instead of just sticking some paint on a road that's already chipping less than a year later and thinking that the job is done. What I can do if I'm elected, and quite frankly, even if I'm not, so inside and outside of the parliament, that I won't be afraid to demand the change and investment that we need. That I can be public and transparent about my advocacy out in the open, working with the community. And I think something that's incredibly important about your advocacy, and we've seen this with the RISE group and with the efforts made by Coburg High as well, is that when we make seats marginal, when we make politicians nervous with grassroots and political pressure, I think that's when we can get some money, and that's when we can get some results done.
Thanks, Angelica. And a lot of discussion around Coburg High tonight, it seems, and I'm inviting Kate Hall next. And thank you, Jose, for that question, by the way, kicking us off. And Kate is now being spotlighted, and over to you, Kate, to ask your question.
Thank you. I hope this one's not too long. Coburg High has a 75% active travel rate, and next year that equates to over 950 vulnerable students moving around the dangerous local roads, which, as we've said, are all 60k, Murray, Bell and Elizabeth. Given that Murray and Bell are so dangerous, there's been a push from the community to get some crossing lights on Elizabeth Street between Murray and Bell. There's a petition associated with that, and both councils agree. It's on the border there between the councils. They've started design work, and it's a Darebin advocacy project. These lights would provide a safe east-west active route, which is sorely lacking, as has come up a lot in the discussion tonight, allowing access not just to Coburg High, but to Melbourne Polytech going the other way. It will connect Coburg and Preston. The lights would also align with the strategic cycling corridor. This is one that council, as Sue knows, council fairly recently decided to do the design and build the strategic cycling corridor in the next 3 years, and that goes, it actually effectively extends O'Hay to the east. So it's a very important one, and these lights would allow that corridor. So given the near total lack of east-west routes in Pascoe Vale, the lights will provide a very positive impact for a relatively modest outlay. So I wanted to know from the candidates, will you advocate for these crossing lights? I'm not quite sure who to put it to, maybe Anthony and the two councillors.
Yeah, we can start with Anthony, and then and I might go to Leah after that.
Okay,
and
thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Kate, and hang out there. And Anthony, please first.
Yeah, thank you, Kate, for the question. And let me kick it off by saying, I mean, how happy I was a couple of weeks ago, along with the school community, to announce $17.8 million to upgrade Coburg High School, the biggest investment ever the school's ever received. So I'm so proud of helping deliver that and hopefully getting elected to deliver that. But along with that as well, definitely, you know, all that, as I sort of touched on earlier, and as you touched on, I think there's almost another stage in the school master plan around active transport and accessibility, both north, south and east, west as well, across a few of those hot spots, which, or black spots basically, where I would, yeah, definitely be a strong partner, as I have been around the master planning of the school and the various stages. I will be a strong partner and a strong advocate with the school community as part of that. And the key point, you know, more than an advocate, I mean, you know, I know before there's a few other projects that were mentioned in terms of having received money and successfully been advocated for, whether it was the Gaffney Street lights near Pascoe Vale Station having planning money, or whether it was the lights at the front of Pascoe Vale South Primary, or Nicholson Street, the Coburg Mosque, and the list goes on and on. Community advocacy is great, definitely has a strong role to play, but what makes the difference as well is having a government in place and a local member in place who's effective, being able to influence those decision makers to get those outcomes and commitments. And that's the type of advocate I am. I always have been, and I will be committed to, if I'm elected here, around these issues and other issues to improve public transport and active transport safety for Coburg High kids and the whole community.
Thanks, Anthony and Leah. And I'm really mindful, we promised to get you out by 8:30. We've got 10 more minutes, and I think we do have at least time for another question after this. But Leah, it'd be great to hear from you on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Kulja, and thank you, Kate, for that question and your advocacy. You've done a brilliant job. Yeah, I'm fully supportive of the installation of lights at Elizabeth Street and in general improving the safety around Coburg High School and other schools in the area. I think, you know, Angelica was saying 250,000 sounds like a lot of money. Maybe my previous job was in government. Maybe I've been in government too long, but I don't actually think it is that much money. When we talk about road changes, you know, that can go like that. And so the question is really, it's all about priorities. And I've touched on this a couple of times, but we're a very car-centric culture, and we just need to shift that really and realign our priorities with who is using the public space, who has a right to use the public space and has a right to be safe while they're doing that. And in terms of how I would advocate if elected, to be honest with you, I think a great way to get through to the government is through highlighting the risk and what may actually happen, and say to them, you know, in Parliament, are you going to wait until a child or multiple children die on that route before you finally turn around and do something? People are telling you about the risks now, act now, and avoid that from happening. And when you put these things in that way to people, it can, you know, set off the risk alarms and can be a good way of advocating. So that is part of how I would put the pressure on if I was elected in government.
Thank you, Leah.
Sorry. Thanks.
And thanks, Kate. And yeah, thanks for putting in your question and coming and answering it, asking it. And we'll go to John Englert now. And if we can find John to spotlight him and come and ask your question, please, John. And I actually think we're getting to the point where we can put it, perhaps if you've got one person in mind who can answer it, that would be great. But yeah, if there's a couple, then please nominate. Thanks, John.
Hi. My question is about the missing link extending the Upfield bike path from Box Forest Road to the Western Ring Road Trail. I note that this has been in progress for the last 12 years at least. And in 2018, the Labor government budgeted to do this link. and yet it's only this year in which it's being re-promised to do it. Vic Roads have outlined how they're going to do it, and for Sages Road, which goes beside Gowrie Station, they're going to make it a mixed traffic route and not put in a shared use path beside the railway line beside Gowrie Station. Now, Sages Road has buses, trucks which come to the factories in Sages Road, and forklifts which come out of those factories to load and unload those trucks. I would not trust a 12-year-old child to cycle along Sages Road as part of the Upfield bike path. Why are we getting a solution which is not fit for purpose for this area?
Dom, who would you like to ask that question?
Anthony Cianflone, if he could answer that.
Anthony, if you could take that question, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So yes, the original project was announced a couple of years ago before my time, and it, I believe due to COVID and due to other delays and issues, it had been delayed, unfortunately, but nonetheless has been announced and committed to commence, as you indicated above. I'm absolutely committed to improving and making sure the Upfield bike corridor is as efficient and as safe as it can be for cyclists, for pedestrians and for commuters. That section of the Upfield path now actually falls within the boundary of Broadmeadows, because the new boundaries that have been redistributed fall on Boundary Road, and south of that is Pascoe Vale electorate now. That portion falls into Broadmeadows. I know that Kathleen Matthews' ward has actually been across that issue and that element of it, and is pursuing that, and she will continue to pursue that if she's elected. And yeah, generally speaking, anything I can do from a Pascoe point of view through the Upfield section that comes through this electorate, I'll continue to be a strong advocate for improving north-south, but also there's east-west connections as well through the strategic cycling corridors, which I think have a lot more opportunity to enhance better connectivity for all residents on all sides.
Thanks, Anthony. And thank you, John, for your question. I really appreciate it. You putting your camera on and asking that. We'll go to see if we can get another one in. Could I invite Pauline, please, to ask your question? Pauline Carmichael.
Hi, thank you. Just a bit of context, and Anthony actually touched on it as well. So the pop-up separated bike lane on Kent Road and Pascoe Vale caused a bit of controversy, and unfortunately it turned into a bit of a battle between stereotypes of cyclists and stereotypes of car drivers. This should never have been the case, and the real safety issue for the elderly, disabled and people with mobility issues accessing a large medical centre has been a bit of a casualty of a broader debate. So my question is, how would you align the state government and local council, both from an integrated bike route strategy point of view, and also the appropriate design options across state and council controlled roads? And how would you ensure the stereotypical controversy doesn't get in the way of genuine evidence and safety-based decisions?
Pauline, did you have someone in mind, or can I throw to, perhaps I'll throw to Sue Bolton for that one to start, or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you went a bit fast for me to write all of that down. I'm sorry, Pauline. So I'm not sure if I've got the absolute full gist of the question, but I am very aware of the issues in the area, and I've met with people on all sides of the debate and discussion, both local cyclists in the Pascoe Vale area who use the separated bike lanes, but also local residents and people from people who've got mobility issues who use the medical centre as well. And I think what has happened in this area is a problem of firstly not having consultation before the project began. So I think Merri-bek Council will probably not do that again, or at least I hope they don't do that again. And then I think the other thing you've got is with these routes, this route was particularly chosen by the state government, but I think the problem is with these routes that, well, with a lot of routes, is that there are often practical issues which have to be addressed and really can't be ignored. I mean, there are issues on all sides that have to be taken account of. And I think we do, you know, I do think the medical centre and the number of people with, you know, mobility issues accessing the medical centre is a real issue and has to be properly taken account of with the issue of, you know, the changes to the road environment in that area. But I also think you do need to look at the question of cyclists who have to go to great trouble to try and map out, you know, safe means of getting across the city to work or wherever. So I think, you know, at the moment there are, you know, there is a plan in the council to look at some alternative routes, which might be, you know, like resolve some of the issues. Now that's not immediate, but that's one of the things that's being looked at the moment.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah,
I just realised I promised everybody that we'd finish on time, and now there's 2 minutes and 6 candidates to do a 1-minute wrap. So I absolutely apologise for that. And we are recording this event and we will put it on YouTube. And I guess candidates, if you want to do a show of hands, whether you want to do a really quick wrap at the end, perhaps you might want to pick up on a question. So if you show of hands, if you want to hang around, I really, apologise for that. And Sue, we'll start with you. So if we can really strictly keep it to just a response, a thought, and about a minute, please. And we'll go about 5 minutes over everybody, if that's all right. And I apologise for that. Starting with you, Sue, and I'll go alphabetical order again.
Well, my comment at the end is about the...
And thank you to our questioner, sorry, apologies. Thank you very much for your question. Sorry, Sue.
My comment is about the Upfield train line. So from hearing 2 ALP candidates for Brunswick, the candidate for Brunswick and Anthony just now, it sounds like the state ALP government and the ALP doesn't have any plan, any serious plan or time frame to duplicate the Upfield line. And I think this is scurrilous, because it's not true that services will increase by 70% once the Metro Tunnel is finished. I support the Metro Tunnel. I think that is a great project, and separating out the Upfield line from, you know, the city loop. But that doesn't allow trains to jump over the top of each other in the single track between Gowrie Station and Upfield line. So the bottleneck will be there, and we will still have train cancellations, which has serious implications. People have lost their jobs and other things. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for being here tonight. Anthony, you're next.
Thank you. I'll be as quick as I can. There's so many things to respond to. I've got a big list here, but I'll sort of wrap it up, I guess. But look, I mean, I'm running to be the Labor candidate for Pascoe Vale. I'm running to, you know, build a better, fairer community that's more sustainable with a better transport system across all modes. Part of that is delivering the Big Build project, which we've committed to through the community, as well as better bus services, better active transport services and the like. A big part of my agenda is really solidifying Coburg as a jobs hub for the North. I think that really can help change the way we commute and our patterns of travel across the community and the region in a really sustainable way going forward. And I also am very proud to be part of a party that has a long history and record on road safety. You know, the Labor government in Victoria established the TAC back in the 1980s. We introduced 50-kilometre speed limits back in 2001 in suburban residential streets. We've also legislated the 1 metre, 1.5 metre rule for motorists to pass cyclists on, amongst, you know, $100 million through our cycling and TAC towards zero strategy projects and initiatives that we've been rolling out since 2014 as well. So there's a whole range of things I'm passionate about and committed to working on as the local member. I look forward to working with all of you, hopefully if I'm elected, and also the other candidates and you know, in the room here tonight, regardless of what happens, you know, hope to see you on the other side and work in good faith with everybody to good outcomes.
Unmute. Thank you very much, Anthony, for that. And Margee, yeah, it'd be great to hear from you now too, just for a minute or so.
And thank you, Anthony, because I think the word outcomes is really important. And I think we're all here because we want fairly similar outcomes. We all have different ideas and solutions, but I think we all feel that more active transport would give us better mental health outcomes, would give us more active children, there'd be less loneliness in our community, and we'd have better mental health outcomes. So I just want to leave it with that I think it's fantastic that we have so many people in this community that want to discuss this stuff, that don't think trains and trams are boring. And because we all think of it, we think of the push-pull factors. And if we keep working at it, then we'll keep progressing with it. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thanks, Margee. And next is Madeleine. Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. I've never ran as a candidate for anything before, so it's yeah, a pretty extraordinary experience overall. And you know, while I'm very unlikely to be elected as a lower house candidate, I do want to make a case for Victorian Socialists in that we do have a good chance of getting upper house candidate Jeremy Small into Parliament. We think that, you know, having his booming, unapologetic, pro-working class, anti-oppression voice into Parliament would just be, you know, an incredible historic achievement for the left. And yeah, I'd encourage anyone who's interested in our campaign to have a read about it online and reach out to us. Yeah, thank you for
Thank you so much. And Leah, please.
Thank you, Kalia. Yeah, so as I said at the start, I am running for the upper house, so I do have a fighting chance of being elected, so I'm excited about that. But I just wanted to finish up with sharing something I saw recently that really resonated with me, and it was an image of a deer crossing a road deep in a forest, and the caption simply read, "The deer isn't crossing the road is crossing the deer's home." And it really instantly brought home to me how car-centric our society is. We barely ever question the right of a road or a car to use up public space. That's just a given. Whereas on the other hand, it's a constant battle to fight for the right of pedestrians, cyclists, and I would say animals as well, to use public space. And even just crossing a road for pedestrians, cyclists, and animals is fraught with danger. So if I am elected in November, I commit to helping shift the focus of the Parliament and the transport budget to focus more on active and public transport options, which are better not only for people, but also for animals and the planet that we share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Angelica, please.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot this evening, I guess, from all of us candidates about our plans for the area. And I think it's been quite clear that there's a consensus that we need more investment in active transport and that it's a human rights, accessibility, and an equity issue as much as it is a climate and emissions one. So I'd like just to wrap up with this. We've had about 40 years of a Labor MP here in Pascoe Vale. This forum existing shows us that we've got big issues to fix, and more of the same isn't going to cut it. I think it's time that we make this seat marginal and make it marginal with a party who has a comprehensive transport plan. And I believe that's the Greens. I believe that when we combine grassroots pressure and political pressure, we can really get stuff done. So thank you so much for this forum. And, you know, I don't think that this will be the end of active transport here in Pascoe Vale. Thank you.
Thanks, Angelica. And thank you, all of you, for spending your evening with us. Thank you to everybody who's come to this meeting and to this forum. I wanted to do a shout out also to the organisers for bringing us together around a really important issue. These things don't just happen. So thank you everybody who's also behind the scenes and been moderating and doing all the hard work. I just turned up and got to meet some fantastic people and hear some great ideas, and keep an eye out for other forums in the lead up to the election. There's a lot to say, and it's still a while off. So thanks to everyone for coming. Apologies again that we ran a little bit over time. And I guess I wanted to echo a lot of the questions where thank you for wanting to represent this area and for Pascoe Vale, and thanks for being here tonight with us all. Thanks, everybody. I don't know how to end the Zoom meeting, so someone else is going to do that. Thank you.